Hey everybody, John Ashburton back today with another video answering your questions, and also one particular topic which came up actually last week, but we've heard it before, so I thought I'd jump on here and talk a little bit about this, which is all about off-duty responsibilities and what I call your most important piece of police equipment, which you don't obviously have in these situations. So I will really jump straight into this, and then if people come on live during this presentation, then I'll answer your questions absolutely as we go. But ultimately, I'm going to add in a preface, a bit of a disclaimer to this, as I often do. But this is my opinion only. As a former police officer, you should absolutely always act within your formal police training, for those of you that make it through to the academy, for your particular state and specific circumstances on which you're trained. Having said that, I know a lot of people are very curious about this topic as to, are police when they're off duty? So when you're actually off duty, you're not in uniform, etc., which is a key piece I'll explain in a second. What are your responsibilities, or what should you and what should you not do in terms of fulfilling your role as a serving police officer or a sworn police officer when you're out and about in the general community? So the black and white answer to this, or the short answer, is that your responsibilities are really very similar to any other citizen, in terms of if you observe something requiring police action, then your responsibilities as a good citizen is to call the police. And in most of those circumstances, you are not the police, right? So without going into the specifics of different situations, and I'll talk about this at the end of this video, but as to, well, what about this situation versus this situation, and so on, and all these back and forths of all these hypothetical situations, because the exact hypotheticals never come up. It's always gray areas anyway. So even if you had a guidebook about, well, if this happens, then do this, sorry, you know, it's going to change by slight variations anyway, right? Which could be critical. But a few points I want to bring up as to why your responsibilities are quite similar, and in most cases, you're not going to directly intervene. And again, this is my opinion only. Firstly, is that you're out of uniform, and there is a huge difference between the way a police officer is perceived when they are in uniform and when they're out of uniform. So for example, if you think that just producing your police identification, because nowadays, yeah, you might have a police badge, but probably not carrying it, you've got a police ID, and pulling that out, if you think that then puts you on the same level as someone in uniform, you are mistaken. It is completely different, and you will see this if you make it through and become serving, particularly when you get the experience of doing police duties in plain clothes versus in uniform. You will see this straight away. It's just literally the way that people perceive you. You can feel the difference in a situation. It is quite different. And let alone when you're in plain clothes, you've often got your accoutrements on anyway, so it's a bit more grey. But when you're literally in civilian clothes, or you're out in your weekend gear and all you've got is your police ID, it's completely different. And that perceived authority, and I've talked about this in other videos before, is massive, because even when you're in uniform, the way that you actually present yourself and those first impressions, if you like, when you are dealing with a number of people or one person, can really set the whole outcome right from the beginning as to whether it goes your way or not your way, and deteriorates and potentially becomes very dangerous. So secondly, the point is that the fact that you're off duty means that you're very likely the only police officer there anyway. And even if you are with other off-duty officers, say there's two of you, there are unfortunately numerous examples where two police officers off duty who may not have intervened in a situation on their own, because there was two of them, decided to do something, but really with the two of them, they had the same dramas that you would have on your own, out of uniform, out of support, and end up getting seriously hurt. So the second aspect of this, the reason I bring that up as well, is that the element of danger is very hard to predict. And the most important piece of equipment I mentioned at the start of this video is your radio. So yeah, you might say, oh, you've got your phone. Well, that allows you to call 000, which goes through to a national call center and eventually goes back, and yada, yada, yada. It's very different to a police radio when you're working for a station and you're actually able to talk to your teammates directly, and you can get support very quickly, particularly if you're working in a population dense area like a CBD central business district, for example. So that's very, very different. Your access to support is greatly reduced when you're off duty. Thirdly, I think I mentioned this just a second ago, but you don't have your actual accoutrements, your means of defending yourself if you needed to, on you anyway. So that whole lack of support makes it quite a bit more dangerous, compounded by the fact that you're not in uniform anyway, so people are more likely to perhaps make a go of it. It does put you at high risk. And the fact that if you are dealing with someone that doesn't like police, they can see it as an opportunity to take advantage of that situation, because you are ultimately more vulnerable when you are off duty. So just to rehash those points, you're not in uniform, you don't have easy access to support, and you don't have the access to the accoutrements that you're normally going to be wearing or in your police vehicle, for example, that are going to help protect you. And finally, if you're going to put, if I would say I would put myself at less risk when I'm off duty, which I would have done, then it is even like 1,000% even less likely that I would get involved if I was out and about with friends or family. Because when you identify yourself as a police officer and you're attempting to resolve something for the good of the community, well, normally when you're in uniform, you're putting yourself at risk and potentially your partner that you're on duty with, which is what you absolutely signed up for. But when you're out with other people who did not sign up for that and potentially become liabilities to the situation, that can be very dangerous for all involved. And again, another reason why I'd definitely advise caution with getting involved in a police incident when you are off duty, or an incident that would require police attention. Now, the obvious question that comes up, nobody's asked it here, but I guarantee someone's thinking it. It's like, oh, well, John, what about these more benign situations where it's more like, just someone does need some help, some assistance, but it looks like it's fairly safe. Do I just get involved then? Well, firstly, it's very hard to judge what situation is and is not going to escalate, even when you're on duty. So it's very hard to predict what that means. But secondly, look, I go back to that, what's the role of a good citizen? Look, if you're talking about, there's an old lady looking for directions that you would help with as a police officer, well, as a good citizen, you'd probably give her directions as well. What I'm specifically talking about is if you were a citizen that was not trained as a police officer, you weren't on duty, and you saw something that you were not going to get involved in, but you felt warranted police attention, what would you do? You'd ring the police. So my comment on this whole purpose of this video really is that it's very likely you would take the same course of action to simply call the police. In fact, one of the great differences that you will have as a police officer is realizing just the wide scope of situations that police are out there on the street to help with. Because a lot of times people don't call the police because they feel like, oh, that's not worthy of police attention. But you will certainly start to understand through even just general police training, there are a lot of situations which may not seem, a huge problem, but you can see the potential in that situation, and you can identify, hey, that is actually worth calling the general attendance police line and letting them know what's going on there. Just so if there is someone available, then they can intervene while it's at an early stage before something potentially escalates. So that's all I wanted to cover today. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I'm having a look at the comments. We don't have any questions today. So if you do have questions after the video, feel free to put them in the comments under this video. As always, all the best with your police selection. This is John Ashburton, and I will see you in the next video.